The storm raged across the frozen land, howling like 1,000 wild beasts. Snow fell so heavy that the sky itself seemed buried in white. The ground shook under the force of the wind, and sharp ice needles cut through the air. In the middle of this endless storm, a small figure moved slowly, step by step, almost falling with each breath. It was a child, an alien child. The child's skin, a pale shade of blue, was cracked by the cold. Tiny hands trembled as they clutched a thin cloth useless against the freezing storm. Every breath came out as a mist of pain. The child had been walking for hours, searching for warmth, for shelter, for something, anything. But the world around was nothing but ice and death. The child's people once lived in this land. Long ago, a colony stood here. Families, homes, and laughter once filled the air. But then came the great collapse. Supplies stopped arriving. The strong left for safer places. The weak were forgotten. Now the colony was nothing but ruins buried under snow. Only a few unlucky souls remained, and this child was one of them. The blizzard roared louder, pushing the child to the ground. The snow swallowed them like quicksand, dragging them into the cold embrace of death. The child's eyes filled with tears that froze before they could fall. The body grew weaker, the legs refused to move, and the heart pounded slower. The child whispered softly, voice breaking in the wind, "Help! Someone, please!" But no one answered, only the storm screaming like a cruel god. The child thought of their mother's face, her warm smile before she disappeared into the storm one night, never to return. They thought of their father, who promised to bring food, but never came back. They thought of being alone, always alone. A small hand reached into the snow as if searching for someone to hold, but there was no one, only the endless cold. The storm grew darker, almost alive. Shadows moved in the distance. The child's heart raced, thinking it was one of the beasts that roamed the ice. Huge creatures with teeth sharper than steel, hunted in storms like this. The child tried to stand but fell again. The world began to blur, fading into white nothingness. And then something strange happened. Through the storm, a sound echoed. Not the roar of the wind, not the growl of a beast, but a rhythm. Heavy, steady footsteps, crunch, crunch, crunch. Each step broke through the snow with power. The child's frozen eyes opened wide. A shape appeared in the blizzard, tall and strong. At first it was only a shadow, moving closer. The child's fear grew. Was it a monster? Was this the end? The figure drew nearer, a dark outline against the storm wrapped in heavy gear, the sound of metal and cloth against the wind. The child tried to crawl away but had no strength left. Their body refused to move. The figure stopped only a few steps away. Through the blur of snow, the child saw a face behind a clear shield of glass, a human face. The child gasped weakly. In every story told by their people, humans were monsters, dangerous predators from a distant world. Parents told their children to fear humans, to stay away if they ever saw one. Humans were called the Deathwalkers because wherever they went, wars followed. But this human did not attack, did not roar, did not carry the face of a monster. Instead, the human knelt down in the snow, lowering themselves to the child's level. Their eyes, sharp but kind, studied the trembling little figure. A gloved hand reached out slowly, carefully. The child flinched, expecting pain, but instead the human placed something soft and warm around the child's shoulders, a heavy coat heated from within. Warmth spread like fire through the child's frozen body. For the first time in days, they felt life returning. The human spoke, voice deep but gentle. The words were strange, foreign, yet filled with calm. The child could not understand the language, but they understood the tone. It was not the voice of a killer. It was the voice of someone who wanted to help. The human lifted the child into strong arms, carrying them as if they weighed nothing. The child pressed weakly against the warm chest, still shaking, still afraid, but not as alone as before. The storm screamed around them, furious at this small act of kindness. But the human moved forward with steady steps unshaken by the blizzard. Every step was power. Every breath was defiance. The child's eyes began to close, the darkness pulling them into sleep. But just before slipping away, they thought of one thing. Why? Why would a human, the creature everyone feared, stop to save one small frozen alien child in a forgotten storm? The answer was hidden in the snow, waiting to be revealed. And as the storm raged on, the galaxy itself would soon learn the truth. That, when all hope is lost, when the universe turns away, a human steps forward. And so, in that frozen wasteland, a legend began. The storm did not stop, but inside the human's arms, the alien child felt a strange sense of safety. The warmth from the heavy coat pushed against the cold, and the steady rhythm of footsteps echoed like a heartbeat. The child's body trembled less, though fear still lingered. What if the stories were true? What if humans saved you only to use you later? The human walked with calm determination as if they had done this many times before. Snow piled up around their boots, yet each step cut through with force. Their breath fogged against the glass of the helmet, and their eyes, sharp, gray, unyielding, watched the storm like a hunter watching prey. The child tilted their head slightly, studying the strange figure. The gear looked nothing like anything from the colony. It was advanced, strong, glowing faintly with small lights. Tubes ran across the suit, feeding warmth into the chest and arms. Across the back rested a heavy pack, humming softly, alive with hidden power. The child wanted to ask a question, but their voice was too weak. All they could do was stare, wondering who this being was and why they had come here. Through the storm, the human finally found shelter. A jagged crack in the frozen cliffs opened like the mouth of a cave. Inside there was darkness, but also safety from the wind. The human stepped in and lowered the child onto a smooth stone surface. The sound of the storm faded slightly, though. The cold air still pressed against their skin. The human pulled something from their pack, a small metal box no bigger than a hand. With a click, light burst out, filling the cave with a soft golden glow. Then, another click, and heat spread through the air. The child gasped as warmth touched their frozen skin. It was like a miracle. Fire. Born without wood, without smoke. The human crouched in front of the child, eyes fixed on them. Slowly, they removed their helmet. The child blinked in surprise. Beneath the heavy glass, the human's face was revealed. Pale skin, sharp features, short dark hair damp with melted snow. There was no monster, no twisted predator, just a tired face with lines of pain and strength. The child shivered and whispered weakly, "Why?" The human tilted their head as if trying to understand. They could not speak the same words, but their eyes carried meaning. The child did not know how, but somehow they felt the answer inside those eyes. Because you were alone. Because no one else came. The human reached into a pouch and pulled out a small packet. They tore it open and handed the child a bar of food. The smell was strange, salty, and sweet. The child hesitated. What if it was poison? But hunger was stronger than fear. Small hands grabbed the bar and sharp teeth bit into it. Warmth spread through the child's empty stomach. For the first time in days, they felt alive. The human gave a faint smile, only for a second, then looked toward the storm outside. Their body remained tense, alert, as if they expected danger. The child followed their gaze and shivered again. Out there in the snow, shadows moved. The storm hid them, but the human's sharp eyes had seen. The child whispered again, weaker now. "They will come." The human turned their eyes back, puzzled by the alien words. But the child did not need translation. The fear in their voice explained everything. Something lived in the storm. Something that hunted. The human nodded slowly, as if they already knew. Hours passed. The storm outside roared without mercy. Inside the cave, the heat from the device wrapped around them. The child slowly regained strength, though exhaustion pressed heavy on their eyes. The human did not sleep. They sat like a stone guardian, always listening, always watching. The child finally spoke again, voice trembling. "Are you real?" The human looked at them, silent. Then, with a small gesture, they placed their hand over their chest, then pointed at the child. A clear message. "I am here. With you." The child felt a lump in their throat. The galaxy had warned them of humans. But in this storm, with death waiting outside, it was a human who had stayed. The human adjusted their weapon, long, black, and heavy, with strange technology. The way their fingers moved across it showed experience, skill, and readiness. The child's heart raced. This was not just a traveler. This was someone who had seen war. As the night deepened, howls echoed across the storm. Deep, guttural, hungry. The child's eyes widened. The beasts were close. The human did not move. They only placed one hand gently on the child's shoulder. A silent promise, "Do not fear, I will fight." The child closed their eyes, clinging to that single promise. In the darkest hour of the storm, when hope was nothing but a fading ember, they had found something no one had expected: humanity. But outside, death moved closer. The storm was no longer the only danger. The real test was coming, and the child did not know if even a human could survive it. The storm outside did not end. It screamed through the cliffs like a wounded beast, shaking the walls of the cave. Snow piled at the entrance, and the night seemed endless. Inside, the small firebox glowed softly, pushing back the cold with its golden warmth. The child sat close to it, tiny hands stretched out, feeling life return to their frozen skin. The human remained near, watching with quiet eyes. They had removed parts of their heavy gear to dry in the heat, revealing scars. Across their arms, long marks, burned lines, and strange wounds that told stories without words. The child stared at those scars, wondering what kind of life could leave such marks. The silence was heavy, broken only by the storm and the low hum of the firebox. Finally, the child whispered, "You saved me." The human turned, listening. They could not understand the words, but the tone carried across the gap between species. The human gave a slow nod, then reached into their pack again. This time they pulled out a flask. They offered it, tilting it toward the child. The child hesitated, eyes wide. But the memory of warmth, of food, gave them courage. They took a small sip. Liquid, hot and strange, flowed down their throat, burning away the last of the ice inside their chest. The child coughed, then smiled faintly for the first time in weeks. The human gave a small smile in return, brief, but real. For a moment, the cave no longer felt like a prison. Hours stretched on. The child began to speak, telling pieces of their story. They spoke of their colony, of parents who had vanished, of friends who never came back from the storm. Their words, cracked with grief, but also with a quiet hope that someone might still listen. The human said nothing. They only watched, their gray eyes steady. Then, slowly, they tapped their chest. "Human," they said in their strange tongue. Then pointed to the child waiting. The child blinked, surprised. "A name?" The child hesitated, then touched their own chest. "Tyrion," they whispered. The human repeated it, the sound heavy but careful. "Tyrion." The child's eyes widened. For the first time, someone had spoken their name in this frozen wasteland. Not as an echo, not as a memory, but alive and real. Tyrion's small heart beat faster. Something began to change inside them. The human, this mysterious stranger from a world feared by all, had listened, had cared, and now had given them back their name. Outside, the storm shifted. Low howls rolled through the snow. Tyrion froze, eyes darting to the entrance. The beasts were near. Shadows stretched across the snowdrift, tall and twisted. The sound of claws scratching against ice scraped like knives. The human heard it too. They rose to their feet, tall and strong, their hand wrapped around the strange weapon again. Pulling it close, they moved toward the cave entrance, scanning the storm with sharp eyes. Tyrion whispered, "They are hunting me." The human turned, as if understanding without needing words. Their face hardened and they lifted a finger. Silent command. "Stay." Tyrion pressed back against the stone wall, heart racing. The storm roared louder. The howls came closer. The beasts were circling, but the human did not step back. They stood tall, their body a shield against the storm. The weapon in their hands hummed with hidden power. Even through fear, Tyrion felt something stir inside, something like awe. The galaxy had always whispered that humans were dangerous, that they were predators, built for war. But in this cave, facing the storm and the monsters outside, Tyrion saw something else. Not just danger, not just war, but strength. A strength that stood between death and the helpless. The beasts scratched at the entrance, testing, waiting for weakness. The human did not move. Hours passed like this. Storm, howls, silence. Then, the scrape of claws again. Through it all, the human stood guard. Tyrion finally whispered, voice shaking, "Why do you fight for me? I am nothing." The human turned only slightly, their eyes soft for a brief moment. They could not speak Tyrion's tongue, but their gaze answered, "No life is nothing, not while I breathe." Tyrion felt tears burn their eyes. They pressed their face into the coat the human had given them, hiding their sobs. For the first time in so long, the child felt safe enough to cry. The night dragged on, heavy with fear. But slowly something new grew inside that cave. Not just survival, not just warmth, but a bond, silent, unspoken, yet stronger than the storm outside. When dawn finally broke, the storm weakened, the wind dying into whispers. The beasts retreated into the white distance, leaving only tracks and silence behind. The human lowered their weapon at last. Their shoulders sagged, weary but unbroken. Tyrion watched them, heart pounding with both gratitude and confusion. This was not how the stories had described humans. They were not monsters. They were not destroyers. They were something else, something far more terrifying and far more beautiful. They were saviors, and Tyrion knew then that their life had changed forever. The first light of day was weak, pale, and broken. The storm had calmed, but the silence it left behind was heavier than the roar of the wind. The world outside the cave was white, endless, and empty at first glance. But Tyrion felt the truth in their bones. They were not alone. The child pressed, closer to the human, eyes fixed on the shadows in the snow. Tracks, massive clawed prints led across the drifts, some fresh, some circling the cave. Tyrion's breath caught. The predators had waited through the night. Now, with the storm gone, they were ready to strike. The human stepped forward, silent as stone. They checked the edges of the cave, their weapon raised, gray eyes scanning every flicker of movement. Muscles coiled like steel springs. The child could feel it. This was not the first time the human had faced death. Then the sound came. A low growl, rumbling through the frozen air like thunder. Another followed, then another. From the mist rose shapes, tall, twisted, and hungry. 6-legged beasts with hides of ice and bone, their mouths lined with jagged teeth, their eyes burning with hunger. Tyrion whimpered and clutched the coat tighter. These were the same creatures that had taken their family one by one. The same monsters that had dragged neighbors into the snow, their screams lost to the wind. Now they had come again. The lead beast howled, a chilling cry that echoed across the cliffs. The others joined in, their voices shaking the earth. The human did not flinch. Instead, they stepped in front of Tyrion, planting themselves like a wall of flesh and iron. The child whispered, "They will kill us." The human glanced back only for a second. Their eyes were calm, but there was fire within them. A promise unspoken. "Not while I stand." The beasts charged. The first one leapt from the snow, claws flashing. The human's weapon roared, spitting, Fire and thunder. The blast tore through the beast's chest, throwing it backward in a spray of smoke and blood. Tyrion's eyes widened. They had never seen such power. The others did not stop. They came from every side, rushing the cave like a flood. The human moved like a storm given flesh. Every shot was precise, every movement controlled. They fired, reloaded, swung the weapon like a hammer when claws came too close. One beast fell, then another. The ground shook with their death cries. But the beasts were many, too many. One claw scraped across the human's arm, tearing fabric and drawing blood. Another lunged from the side, and the human barely twisted away in time. Tyrion cried out, terror filling their chest. Still, the human did not retreat. They fought with a fury that seemed endless. Their breath steamed, their hands bled, but their eyes never wavered. They were not fighting only for survival. They were fighting for the small life hiding behind them. Tyrion's tiny hands shook as they watched. The galaxy had always whispered that humans were predators, built for killing. But this was different. The humans' every strike, every movement, carried, not cruelty but protection. They killed because they must. Because the child mattered. A beast crashed through the side of the cave, jaws snapping inches from Tyrion. The child screamed, stumbling backward, but the human was faster. They slammed into the monster, forcing the barrel of their weapon between its teeth, and pulled the trigger. The blast blew the creature apart, spraying the walls with smoke and bone. The cave filled with fire, with echoes of war. The snow outside was stained red. Beasts fell one after another, their howls breaking into silence. The air smelled of smoke, iron, and blood. At last, the final predator stood alone, growling low, its eyes burning with hate. It was larger than the rest, its body scarred from years of battles. The leader. The human lowered their weapon for a moment, chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Blood dripped from their arm. Their face was pale with exhaustion. But when the beast roared and charged, they stepped forward once more. The battle was brutal. Claws slashed, teeth snapped, and the human met it with fire and steel. The weapon spat its last round, striking the beast but not killing it. The creature lunged, slamming the human against the wall. Tyrion screamed, but the human did not fall. With bare hands, they seized a shard of broken ice and drove it deep into the beast's throat. The monster thrashed, roared, and finally collapsed in the snow, its body shaking before going still. Silence returned. Heavy, endless. The humans staggered, blood running down their side, their breath shallow. They dropped the ice shard and leaned against the cave wall. Tyrion rushed forward, small hands reaching out, eyes wide with fear. The child whispered, You saved me again." The human looked down at them, face pale, eyes burning still with that same unyielding fire. They did not speak, but they did not need to. The truth was in every wound, in every scar. They would bleed 1,000 times before letting the child fall. Outside, the snow was no longer silent. The corpses of beasts lay broken, proof of a single human's defiance. Tyrion stared at them, heart pounding. For the first time, the child understood why the galaxy feared humans, not because they killed, but because they never surrendered. And now, that strength was their shield. The cave was silent now, but it was not peace. Smoke still curled from the weapon. Blood steamed against the snow, melting into black puddles. The bodies of the beasts lay scattered like broken statues. The storm had ended, yet the air was heavy, filled with the weight of death. Tyrion stared at the human in shock. Their savior stood tall, yet unsteady. Blood dripped from a deep wound across their side, staining the snow dark red. Each breath came hard, shallow, but their eyes, those gray, unyielding eyes, remained sharp. The child's small hands trembled as they stepped forward. "You're hurt," they whispered, though they knew the human could not understand their words. But maybe they could understand the fear in the child's voice. The human looked down at Tyrion, gave a faint nod, then crouched with effort. They tore strips of cloth from their own gear and pressed them against the wound. Their jaw tightened, but no sound of pain escaped. They worked with calm hands, as if wounds like this were nothing new. Tyrion felt a sting of shame. The human had bled. For them, fought for them, yet they could do nothing in return. They were just a child, helpless, weak. The human finished binding the wound, then pushed themselves back to their feet. Their legs shook for a moment, but they forced strength into them. They lifted the weapon again, checked the empty chamber, then tossed it aside with a sigh. No more rounds. Only their hands, their will, and the frozen world outside. The child swallowed hard. What now? As if in answer, a sound echoed through the cliffs. A howl, louder than before, deeper, more terrifying. The human's eyes narrowed. They stepped toward the cave entrance and looked out. Across the white wasteland, more shadows moved. Dozens. The beasts had not come alone. The pack had been larger. The ones that attacked were only the hunters. The rest were still coming. Tyrion's blood turned cold. No. It never ends. The human turned back, their face carved from stone. They crouched in front of the child, placed one hand firmly on their small shoulder, and locked eyes. It was not a question, it was not a command, it was a promise. We fight together. We survive together. Tyrion's eyes burned with tears. They nodded. The human reached into their pack again, pulling out tools, wires, and small canisters that glowed, faintly blue. They began working quickly, setting them across the cave floor along the walls near the entrance. Tyrion watched in awe. They didn't understand the devices, but they could see it. The human was building traps. Minutes passed like hours. The howls grew closer. The ground trembled with the pack's advance. The child pressed against the stone, clutching the heavy coat tighter, their heart racing. Finally, the human stood, their face shining with sweat, their wound still bleeding. They positioned themselves at the mouth of the cave, standing tall like a final guardian. Their hand rested on a trigger device. The beasts appeared. Dozens of them. Their bodies filled the snow, eyes glowing in the rising light. Their leader, even larger than the last, bared teeth the size of blades. The pack roared as one, the sound shaking the cliffs. Tyrion whispered, "We can't win." The human did not look back. They raised the trigger. The beasts charged. A flash tore the air apart. Explosions ripped through the snow as the hidden devices ignited. Fire roared, shaking the ground. Beasts were thrown into the air, their bodies burning, their howls echoing across the wasteland. Still, many survived. They poured through the smoke, charging into the cave. The human moved like a storm. Their fists struck with bone-breaking force. Their body, though wounded, was unyielding. Every move was precise, every strike a defiance against death. They seized, jagged stones and shards of ice, turning them into weapons. Blood sprayed. Roars filled the cave. Tyrion screamed as a beast lunged too close. The human spun, shoving the child behind them, then drove the ice shard deep into the creature's chest. The beast fell, thrashing, but the human did not stop. The pack pressed harder, filling the cave with teeth and claws. The human's body was marked with new wounds. Their breath grew heavier, their strength slower, but their eyes never broke. Not once. Tyrion's heart pounded. Something inside them snapped. They could not just watch. They grabbed a broken piece of metal from the ground, sharp at one end, and swung it at a beast creeping near. The strike barely scratched its hide, but it drew the monster's attention. The human turned instantly, rage blazing in their eyes, not at the child, but at the creature that dared to threaten them. With a roar, they slammed into the beast and crushed its throat with their bare hands. The fight dragged on until the last creature fell. The cave floor was painted with blood, bodies piled high. The human stood in the middle, chest heaving, their body trembling with exhaustion. Then finally their knees buckled and they dropped to one side, collapsing against the stone. Tyrion rushed forward, small hands pressing against their savior's chest. "No. Don't leave me, please." The human's eyes opened weakly. Blood stained their lips. They reached out, placed a trembling hand against Tyrion's cheek and whispered something in their strange tongue. The child could not understand the words, but they knew the meaning. I will not stop. Not for you. Tyrion's tears fell hot and heavy. For the first time, the child did not feel like nothing. For the first time, they felt seen, and for the first time, they believed. Maybe humans were not just feared for what they could destroy. Maybe they were feared for what they could protect. The fight was not over, but survival was no longer a dream. It was a promise. The cave smelled of smoke, blood, and steel. Broken bodies of beasts lay scattered across the stone floor, their claws twisted, their lifeless eyes staring into nothing. Outside, the snow was no longer clean white but streaked with black and red, marked forever by the battle that had been fought here. In the center of it all, the human leaned against the wall, chest rising and falling with slow, painful breaths. Their wound was deep, and the cloth they had tied around it was soaked in blood. Their weapon lay broken at their side. Their hands, raw and torn, trembled from exhaustion. Tyrion knelt in front of them, small hands clutching their coat. Tears blurred their vision. Don't die, the child whispered again and again, even though the human could not understand their words. Please, don't leave me. The human's eyes opened slowly. Those gray eyes still burned with fire, though the body they lived in was weak. The human raised a hand, touching Tyrion's shoulder, steady and strong even in pain. The message was clear. I am still here, still fighting. The child pressed their forehead against that rough hand, shaking. In that moment, the galaxy's lies shattered. Humans were not monsters. They were not destroyers. They were something far greater. Outside, the storm had ended completely. The sky cleared, revealing the pale sun casting light over the wasteland. Tyrion glanced toward it, their breath catching. For the first time in so long, the snow seemed less like a tomb and more like a path forward. But there was no time to rest. In the distance, faint echoes carried across the cliffs. The cries of more beasts, far away, but moving closer. Tyrion's chest tightened. The war was not finished. The land itself wanted them dead. The humans stirred, as if sensing the same. They pushed against the stone, trying to rise. Their legs shook, nearly giving way, but they forced themselves upright. With every ounce of strength left, they stood tall once more. Tyrion looked up at them in awe. Even broken, even bleeding, the human refused to fall. Their spirit was like fire. It burned, and it would not die. The child swallowed, then whispered, I'll help. They searched the cave, gathering what they could. Shards of metal, sharp bones, pieces of broken devices. Their small hands trembled, but they worked quickly, making crude tools, stacking stones at the cave entrance. The human watched with tired eyes, and for the first time a faint smile crossed their face. Together, human and child prepared for survival. Hours passed. No beasts came. The world outside remained quiet, only the wind brushing across the snow. The child and the human sat by the dying glow of the firebox, silent but together. Tyrion finally spoke, voice soft but steady. I thought I was nothing. I thought no one would care if I disappeared, but you came. You, a human. The human tilted their head, listening, even if the words were strange. Their eyes, however, carried an answer. You are not nothing, you matter. To me. The child's throat tightened, but no tears came. Instead, something else rose inside them. Strength. Hope. The storm outside could return. The beasts could come again. But now, they were not alone. When the next dawn came, Tyrion stood at the cave entrance, looking over the endless frozen land. For the first time, the horizon did not look empty. It looked like a road leading somewhere. Somewhere new. Somewhere safe. The human joined them, still weak, but alive. They placed a heavy hand on the child's shoulder, steady and protective. Tyrion looked up, meeting those unbreakable gray eyes. and whispered the word that burned in their chest. Savior. The humans said nothing, but their silence was stronger than any word. And so, the legend began. In the far corners of the galaxy, whispers would spread, of a child left for dead in the snow, of a storm that swallowed hope, of beasts that ruled the frozen land, and of a single human, alone, bleeding, unyielding, who stood against it all. They would call it impossible. They would call it madness. But the truth would remain. When the galaxy abandons you, when the cold takes everything, when death is certain, a human will still stand, not as a monster, not as a destroyer, but as a savior. And for Tyrion, the small forgotten child, that truth was carved forever into their heart. The storm had not won. The beasts had not won. The frozen wasteland had not won. Humanity had.